Good afternoon. Well, tomorrow afternoon, the International Court of Justice will hand down its ruling in our government's latest application for more provisional measures against Israel for its actions in Gaza. Last week, our legal team argued that Israel is guilty of genocide for the way in which it's killed Palestinians in Gaza. Israel denies the claims. It says it's only acting against Hamas and is only acting in self-defense. Meanwhile, earlier this week, the prosecutor at the International Criminal Court, Karim Khan, announced he was seeking arrest warrants for 2 Israeli leaders and 3 Hamas leaders for their roles in the conflict. Professor Hennie Strydom is a professor of public and international law at the University of Johannesburg. Professor Strydom, good afternoon to you and thank you for your time. It's easy to get confused with all of these international court applications at the moment. Please just remind us of the different roles these courts play. One deals with disputes between nations and one deals with the actions of individuals. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct, Stephen. There is a bit of confusion quite frequently, and I can understand why. Both are international bodies dispensing some kind of justice. And in the case of the ICJ, it's about the responsibility of states under the international law on state responsibility. In this instance, more specifically, the responsibilities of states under the Genocide Convention. But as you have said, in the case of the ICC, that court deals with the individual criminal responsibility of individuals in government or in organizations, whatever the case might be. So, and that is what we heard about the arrest warrants now for the high-ranking officials on the side of Israel as well as on the side of Hamas. And that is a criminal court dispensing criminal justice. And that process will still unfold.
If you look at the arguments that our government put forward last week, I mean, is it possible to know what kind of decision the International Court of Justice might announce tomorrow? I mean, they're obviously not going to give much indication, but there must be certain issues that you can see the decision will actually rest on this argument that came from us or this argument that came from Israel.
Yeah, I think the one point to make is that the one issue that South Africa was putting forward very forcefully was the whole issue about the famine that's unfolding in Gaza, and that situation is getting worse at the moment. And South Africa used that argument to ask the court to upscale the measures it considered in the past. And at the one extreme, it asked the court to order Israel to immediately cease the hostilities and to withdraw its troops from Gaza. And of course, the second issue closely related to the famine issue is the access of humanitarian aid. And South Africa, in this instance, has made the point that Israel is still, in certain instances, blocking the flow of aid packages to Gaza. And Israel has disputed that, and it has referred to certain increase in numbers of truckloads and packages going through the Gaza post at the moment. So there is a bit of a dispute on the factual situation, also in a few other instances, but mainly I think that is the main issue at this point in time for the court to consider. And you're asking, what is likely to happen? It's very difficult to say. I doubt whether the court will use this opportunity and with the new evidence to order Israel to cease its hostilities. I think the court will more concentrate on the access of humanitarian aid and to measures that should be taken in that regard, not only by Israel, but also by other states who may be able to assist with that issue.
When it responded to our arguments, Israel really just attacked the evidence. So it just said that the evidence that we'd brought wasn't factual. And I found that a curious response because some of the evidence must be able to be verified, including by United Nations agencies. And we've seen, United Nations agency head after United Nations agency head after United Nations Secretary General basically calling for Israel to stop this. So, I mean, does that really work? Can you really just say, well, the evidence is wrong? I mean, this has been an argument from Israel, by the way, and people who support Israel, not just in this legal proceeding, but everywhere. They just simply say it's not happening.
Yeah, you're quite right. And it's been following that line of argument right from the beginning. And you're quite right. I think the number of sources on which South Africa relies and on which we also in certain instances rely are wide ranging, and they come from various bodies and from various individuals in institutions. So collectively, they point to a very serious situation. And I think that is the point that South Africa wanted to make. If Israel disputes it, it will have to be more concrete with its allegations in that regard and give better justification for its arguments than it has done hitherto. And I think that is one of the weak points in Israel's response to the South African case.
We know that Israel said it would literally ignore this court and the International Court, International Criminal Court. But as I understand it, the International Court of Justice is something you sign up to. South Africa signed up to it. Israel signed up to it. Can it just withdraw from the court if it doesn't like the outcome?
Yeah, it's like any contract. A state can withdraw, but it hasn't done so. And what is another point to take into account, this whole case is before the court on the basis, inter alia, of the fact that Israel is a party to the Genocide Convention. And that is the basis of the whole case that South Africa brought to the court. So, and it still is a state party to that convention. And its obligations must be measured in terms of that convention and also in terms of what it is doing to comply with its obligations under the Genocide Convention.
There's so many different things that are happening here. And the great question, of course, is does all of this argument, as reasoned, as rational, as important it may be, have any impact on what's happening on the ground? And it's tempting to just say, no, it isn't. But I think we're also seeing, we saw yesterday, 3 European countries saying that they would now recognize Palestine as a state. They've never said that before. Over 140 countries do recognize Palestine as a state, including ours, including our government. So this court and the arguments that we're seeing are also playing a role in the court of international public opinion. And do you think the arguments that we're seeing in the court are playing a role in that? And particularly, we all know that Israel really does rely on support from the United States. Do you think that it is changing global public opinion in some way, even if the findings don't come, even if Israel ignores the findings, all of those things? Is it still important, I suppose, is my question.
You're absolutely right. It plays a role very significantly in shaping public opinion and international opinion and developments. And we see that in a range of areas amongst states, and you mentioned the recognition of Palestine as a state by certain European countries. And that will probably snowball. And the other sort of the protests that we have seen, announcements by politicians, state leaders, and so on. It's very much moving to a point where Israel is becoming totally isolated, and to a certain extent, the United States of America as well. So, and I think that is that development that will eventually have a serious impact on how this whole issue will play out, and what Israel is going to do at the end, especially with what to do with Gaza post the conflict. Now, the second point I want to make is the sort of stance that Israel is taking at this point in time, not to comply with the orders of the ICJ, and its stance in general on the conflict, may count against it eventually, and I say if it happens, that the leaders, Netanyahu and his minister, will eventually be arraigned before the ICC. Because by continuing, in this sort of fashion, it strengthens the sort of proof of intent that might play a role in the cases before the ICC.
Professor Hennie Strydom, thank you. A professor of public and international law at the University of Johannesburg. So really appreciate the time.